right? Because I ran data centers back in EDS. And for those of you who remember or have less hair than I do, yes, sir. Well, the fun thing about EDS, it had two great things. One great thing was it was an outsourcer. So you're like the butler to everybody, right? You're like, yes, sir, what would you like? And therefore, it's even worse than being an IT shop, an IT department, because...
Especially if you worked with a union.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
GM.
There you go. Exactly. Well, GM was one of them. I ran two airlines. Yeah.
Yes, at GM.
Oh, fun. I ran the data centers back in Mexico, and we had 36 data centers. So I had Aeromexico and Mexicana, both airlines, whatever. Well, anyways, it was really fun because literally you're like the butler. You're not even part of the family, right? You're a vendor that they somewhat like. They'll kick you if anything goes wrong. So something that's really haunting you when you're a vendor of this and you're selling the service is you got to be efficient. So this has been a topic that has been dear and near to my heart forever. And I've always wanted to have hard data. And about a year ago, I met this gentleman, Brett Williams. And I'll give him all the credit in the world. This guy is super brilliant. He is from New Zealand, and he is smart as a whip. And he showed me some data that he was doing research on. And that's what I'm going to show you today. But before I show you the data, I need to go through some relevancy. I need to go through a little bit of the model of the optimization. You won't see what you've seen in previous years. You see some new. And then I need to go through some videos, at least two. And if you're tired by the first one, then we'll skip the second one. But I just want you to see what I mean when I say it. I get it. It's not a demo. And I get it. It's just a scenario that you've probably seen because I'm not going to show you future products, okay? But I'm going to try to show you what happens when you do A plus B plus C, and then I'll tell you about the TCO and the efficiency and the benefit. Because in my point of view, with all due humbleness to you, if I don't show you how it feels and how it looks, and then what's the benefit, we're just going to argue. You're going to say, yeah, but if you move a little bit more to the left, you would be, well, fine. But see the whole picture and see how it feels. So I hope the whole 360 approach is to your liking, okay? Because I could have gone just deeper into the numbers, but I think this way explains it into a more richer conversation. Nice thing about this deck is you get everything. You get the videos, you get the deck, you get the macros. It's all there. You just download it, whether it be on the CD or the website after the event. But I uploaded the whole thing. So with that, let's start. Again, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's going to be a conference CD or just a website, but I posted the whole thing so that you guys would get it. That's my point. Again, Eduardo Castro, and thank you very much for being here. I love starting with this slide because I'm super sarcastic about it. So here, let me play this game with you guys. Worst thing to do, 8:30 in the morning. If I have a traditional data center, and I sprinkle some virtualization on top of it, do I have a virtualized data center? No. No. You see, it's lovely because every time I talk to you good people, we agree. I'm not joking. Everybody says no. When I talk to some of the product groups and everybody, they're like, yeah. I'm like, no, go talk to some good people, man. No. The answer is no. And if I ask you why, and this is the good question, I'm going to get 10 different answers, and I'm going to agree with all of them. Some people say, because you didn't virtualize storage. I'm not joking. And some people say, because you didn't have any management. And some people, you see, I could go left, right, forward, backwards, but the point is we agree that just by sprinkling some virtualization on your data center, you are not here, right? And what if I just grab your stuff? I didn't say the bad word. I said stuff, okay? Some of you think like me, some of you don't. I'm aiming to the decent ones. If I grab your stuff and I put it on somebody else's data center, well, some of you are going to say that's called hosting, and some of you are going to say that's called private cloud. But I think nobody's going to say, if you grab just my stuff and put it somewhere else, I have a private cloud, right? Sadly, a lot of people are calling that IaaS, infrastructure as a service, right? They're saying, if you just grab your stuff and put it in somebody else's, but it's still yours, whatever part of the stack, that's called IaaS. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'd like to go back to the good old days where we just called it hosting. But if you have running, if you're running some of the automation pieces, is that IaaS? Well, that's where it gets really nifty. It gets really interesting. Because I think that the only part where everybody agrees is self-service, chargeback, elasticity. And those things don't come just from sprinkling virtualization or a little bit of management. And last but not least, is there a real path between private and public? Here, let me explain myself. I think we all agree that private is you own part of it, right? You run part of it, you manage part of it. And public is you just consume a service, right? So example, private would be you own the house, whether it be time shared or whether it be sliced with your brother. You see my point? Whatever, but you own the house. And you decide the furniture, when you use it, everything, right? You own the house. Fine. You also pay taxes on the house. You also administrate the house. Do you make up the menu? Duh. Yeah, you make up everything. It's you, man. You wake up in the morning, you make whatever you want. What's the difference with a public? You rent a hotel room. Do you decide the menu? No, you consume from the menu. You see the massive difference between one and the other? So is there a real path between private and public? Gee, I don't know. I mean, there should be, but is there a real simple path of grabbing some of your stuff? Well, if you consume it as a service. Example, if you run Exchange right now, and then you just buy inboxes. Something like that, yes. But maybe your business application, your payroll application, it would have to be very standardized.
Differently if it's a service, because then it goes in your operations under taxes, and if you own it, then you pay for it differently.
It has to be standardized for you to be able to make it so that multi-tenancy works, so that they can sell it to a ton of people, and then it makes sense. If not, nobody's going to give you your own stuff back. Said in a different way. This is where I'm going. If you start sprinkling A plus B plus C plus D, then I would agree. And I don't know if I have all the words I need here. Okay, maybe you're going to add one more and I'm okay with that. But as you start adding things like monitoring, configuration management, virtualization, and then you start consuming them. Because when you say automation, that one is not part of a feature. That's you truly taking it to the next level. And I'll try to show you that in this session. I'm trying to go humbly into what happens if you actually use the stuff above 40%. Okay? So if you actually integrate above 40% of the feature functions of your stack, of your platform, not of one tool, but 1, 2, 3, 5 tools, what happens? How does it feel? And then I think you may talk here. Now, when you buy it from here, you're buying it from there. You see, you're not configuring it, you're buying it from them. Okay. So I'm going to do just a couple slides of this, but I think it's going to be good. I'm going to go back on the stage because I need the mouse for this. But you guys stay here, okay? Don't go to the other side of the room. There's always a really hard question. I'm sorry I'm talking to you like this, but this is where the screen is. There's always a really hard question about how do you make this talk so that it is understandable? And this is the best approach I've had. Let's grab each aspect of the Microsoft optimization model. Don't try to read this. It's unreadable. We know that. Grab one line at a time, okay? Just grab the top line and stay with me. When you start asking yourself, whether you're private, public, in your cloud, without a cloud, data center, normal, it doesn't matter, okay? But let's start asking the questions. What's your high availability strategy? Well, I have clustering and hot spares. Do you have service availability via clustering and or load balancing? No, not yet, but I'd like to get there. Or you could say, yes, I'm there. Whichever. I'm giving you an example. What about your compliance? Well, right now I have it in policies, and I would like it to be near real time. What about your monitoring? Well, I have good monitoring, but I'd like to be end-to-end. Okay. What about virtualization? I have consolidation of workloads. I would like to have consolidation of management of my workloads. Fine. What about capacity planning? Well, I have no capacity planning, or, I'm not going to be sarcastic. I have some capacity planning, and that's where I want to stay. I don't want near real-time production capacity planning. Fine. What about asset management? Well, I'm going to say that you do have some, but I would like it to be scheduled and automated. Update management, yes, I have centralized, and I would like it to be policy-driven. Again, same for application compatibility testing. but I'd like to stay there, no end-to-end automated sequencing, and I'd like to define, I have a defined set of their server images, and I'd like them to be centrally updated. You know what I just did? I don't know if it took me, I'm not kidding you, I don't know if it took me a full minute to do this. But what I just did is I just built a roadmap of saying this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be. The fun thing about building it this way, and that's why I'm decomposing it to this level, is that when you start talking about each one of these, they become real tangible projects. Do you agree with me? Yeah. Excuse me for saying this is not, 3,000-foot BS. This is you grabbing and saying, do I have a definition of what my 80% critical servers are? Yes or no? If you answer no, then what's step one? Step one is go define which are your 80% critical servers. Once you've defined that, what are you doing for those 80%? Then you go one by one. This one has just RAID 1, right? That's the availability strategy we build into it. Nothing is good or bad, understand. Nothing is good or bad as long as you have a strategy and you actually follow it. What I like about this approach is it takes you into a 2-3 year approach that you can actually follow and you can actually check box. In fact, some of the most interesting companies I've worked with, what they do is they assign the bonus of everybody involved. I'm not just talking about the IT person. Everybody involved into this roadmap. So they say, look, if you achieve 3-step moves, you get your bonus. If you don't, so now, but the interesting thing is they do this for the security area, for the central data center area, and for the distributed systems area. So everybody's tied on the same objectives. And then you get it, when it hurts, you get it. But the beautiful thing about this is now let's look at the next one. What about server security? Well, I do have a malware strategy, and I don't have automated IPS, and I want it. I have centrally managed application protection for some apps, and I'm not going to go anywhere else with that. I do have integrated perimeter firewall web gateway isolation, and I'll stay there. And I do have standardized remote access, but I would like to have quarantine and compliance. I'm trying to show you that when you decompose it, this would be for networking, right? DHCP, quality of services, DNS, and caching. And this would be for storage. Let me go into the storage one. I'll give you another great example. I don't know if you notice, but maybe you're saying he's going 2 down, and other people are saying he's staying 2 up. Well, what I have found is that this is a common middle ground that you can talk between technical and semi-technical. Non-technical are not going to get this, obviously, but semi-technical people and say, this is our objective, and you can compose a goal out of this. Again, let me show you what I mean by that. Oh, come to this side, guy. This is where the party is. Yeah. So, what about your disk management? Well, I have managed arrays, and I obviously want to cluster or shared arrays. What about RAID? Yes, widely utilized and transparent failover. In fact, we'll just go all the way here. What about file shares with caching? Would you like them to have geo-distributed? Not necessarily. You see, some of this stuff is pretty cloudy, some of it ain't. Some of it is just good old-fashioned IT. What about e-discovery policies? Well, I have it defined, but it's not automated, and I don't know when I'll get there. Fine. What about sensitive information management and automated identification and management of that, as well as classification? Go on and on. I'm asking you guys, you don't have to move from there, but I'm mostly talking on this side because I'm avoiding that side. Ah, there you go. So, enough of the macros. I hope those slides help you guys. That's all I'm saying, okay? I hope they help you crystallize a simple roadmap. But what is the point that I'm trying to make? When you do every single one of those lines with a different team, and every one of those guys have a different strategy, you end up with this. I hope you agree with me. Every single layer that you have has a different tool and or process for monitoring configuration, high availability, service management, ticketing, etc., etc., etc. Backing up, recovering. And then you end up with a wonderful question. What happens when you actually want to automate this? Because I think we all agree that where you want to go is efficiency, right? And if you want to be more efficient, you're going to have to automate. I'm sorry to tell you, okay? There's many other fantastic words that you could use. The best one I've found is automation. And in order to do that, You need to have a one-line path that you can say, if I want to do whatever, automated recovery, automated patch management, automated deployment, automated, any one of those. If I have a broken set of tools, processes, and or functional areas, can I do that? No. And that's the point. It doesn't mean you have to unify in kumbaya. It just means you have to agree. You see my point? I didn't say reorg. I said just agree. So this is where I get really criticized. A lot of people come to me and say, your next step I don't like. Well, please allow me humbly to say the following thing. What if I stop talking about your whole infrastructure? I know you have Unix, I know you have mainframe, and you're lying about it, saying that you don't, but you have some mainframe. And I know that for some of you, mainframe is going to be just real old Unix, and for some of you, it's going to be real old AS400 or HP 3000. And some of you actually have some good old Z machines, some good old mainframes. And nobody's going to throw them away. And I know that everybody says, or I hope everybody says, because it's been the karma of my life, if I don't have one management tool, then I'm not going to buy one more. Well, who told you that one is going to be enough? You see, who lied to you and came and said, you're not going to end up with 14? And when you get to 14 and you say, no, I'm not going to buy 15, then how'd you get to 14, man? Right? I mean, I don't know how many is enough. And it's not a competition of who has more. It's also not a competition of how many you consolidate. The competition is, do you have the right set of tools to manage your environment? Because the other great thing is people come to me and they say, I have an incredible solution for my Unix environment. And I have a I'm not monitoring my Active Directory. Even better one, I'm not monitoring or configuring my DNS services. And I'm like, if they go down, anything happens? Anyone? And you're like, yeah, it all falls down. I'm like, oh, great. There you go. That one works for me too. So my point is, you really have to understand that each one of your services, it doesn't matter where it is, each one ends up being business critical, some more than others. And each one deserves respect. Am I on the right path here? And therefore, you cannot continue with this path of, no, if I don't have this on 3 tools, then I'm not going to have it. Who told you 3? That's my point, right? Who told you 5? Maybe in your case, it's going to be 17. And maybe in his case, it's going to be 13. Fine. Pick the right ones. But do me a favor. Just like you know that some of the tools are incredible for Unix, recognize that some of the tools are incredible for Windows. And then I have a conversation. Because you know what I'm trying to say? What if I would grab and I would say, I'm not going to do this for every single platform. I'm going to do it for one platform, which in this humble session is going to be Windows. Okay? Why? Because you're a tech kid. I'm sorry. If you'd be in Unix world, I'm sure it'd be for Unix. But in this case, I'm sorry, it's going to have to be Windows. I'm not saying that you cannot do for more platforms. Look, we are already pretty heterogeneous. We're already going more. And this is going to be a good conversation. But get me right. There's a lot of surface of Windows stuff out there that's not completely managed. And what I'm going to try to show you in this session is what happens if you do and how do you do it. So, what is vertical versus horizontal integration? Vertical integration is what all you guys know. If I get a failure in hardware, I do something, right? Whatever that something means. Fine. My point in horizontal integration is if something happens way out there, should I be reacting differently? And I call that automation. You see my point? If something happens way out there environment, let me give you an example. If a ton of people log into a different website, and I know that website does, I do all the collection, all the payment processing for that website, should I add more capacity? You see, should I react differently because something is happening on the service environment, on the whole end-to-end environment? I'm going to give you a small example. I know it's a video. Again, I already apologize for not being brave enough to do all this in live demos, but I don't have enough time. And I want you to take them home. It's my theory that videos serve the purpose. This is System Center Operations Manager 2007 R2 on purpose. I want to show you production environment tools, okay? Not even futures. Not even 2010. What did I do? I downloaded the management pack of HP. Okay? Why HP? Because it's a service that I did for this demo. You can do it for Dell, you can do it for IBM. Everybody has this. And what I'm doing is I'm monitoring the electricity consumption. Again, I'm not showing you the tools, I'm trying to prove a point. So by monitoring the electricity consumption, I'm going to do something very interesting. I'm going to make my infrastructure behave differently by how much electricity it consumes. Is that interesting? So again, I know you guys understand this. So I'm not showing you the technology, I'm showing you the integration. What's going to happen here is I'm measuring, and not the PDUs, but I'm measuring just the consumption of the servers on my data center, and I've put a quota on myself. I've said some servers are going to be high availability, meaning they consume all that they want, and other servers are going to be quota-based, so they can consume a certain capped amount. And here I've divided them into racks, and then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to see that I have a, like you see there, an alert, and I'm going to see that the alert is not that my website is down, or my SQL server is down, or my operating system, or a service, is that I've consumed more electricity than I've allowed this server to consume, right, on the quota. Now, why is this interesting? And this is where it gets interesting. I'm going to go now to Virtual Machine Manager, and I don't know if you noticed, I already have a pro tip, which for those of you who do not know, this I'd like to mention is, in my humble opinion, true integrated automation. It comes in the tool, you don't have to configure this. Beautiful thing is, Virtual Machine Manager is telling me, you know what, the host for these two virtual machines that you have here, the host has an alert back in Operations Manager. And the alert is it's consuming too much electricity. Would you like me to solve it? And you can say, yes, go ahead, implement. You could tell them, no, tell me what it is. And I decide, and you can tell them, don't bother. Fine. When we said implement, what did we do? This is a 4-step equation. And this is the part that I like about this demo. And I've carried this demo for a year now because I really think it proves the point. The first step is, out of these two virtual machines, how much do they consume? Memory, CPU, the whole 9 yards. So I can measure what is that equal to wattage, or my accent is killing me, watt consumption, okay? Electricity consumption. These are virtual machines. So what would they be equal to? So which one should I move? And I decide, well, you know what? It should be this one. So now the real question is, where should I move it to, right? So then you have to go to the other servers in your environment and not only measure performance, where this virtual machine is going to run optimally, but also which one is going to remain below their quota of electricity so I can move it into. So what I'm trying to show you is, I know it's not massive automation, but it's a simple enough example. See, this is something that I did, which is I'm grabbing something way off the wall there, and I'm behaving differently on my environment based on it. Okay. The only thing you're going to see by the end of this video, which is another 30 seconds, and I've proven my point, and let me move on.
This is similar to plate spin?
Well, this is different. Let me take that one at the end. No, because this is just one category. Again, I could have shown it with a partner or a competitor. I'm just trying to show automation.
Okay.
I'm just trying to show if you actually grab A plus B plus C, how does it look? How does it feel, right? Because when I go into integration in a second, if I didn't show you this, some of you are going to say, yes, I get it, and some of you are going to say, what is integration? Well, integration is not when I have one tool that works well and does everything it's supposed to do, but when I have 4 tools that work well and they are actually integrated. That's what I'm trying to prove. So, enough, you see, it gets moved from one host to the other. I never told it which host to move to. Fine. Good enough. I'm going to ask you if you want to see this one, and if you don't, I'm serious by the amount of hands, and if you don't, we move on to the interesting part, okay? Which is the actual numbers. This is another simple demo that does something very simple. It's self-service, virtual machine manager. You create a template, you assign a user. But then we did 2 things. We added a PowerShell script so that at the end of the sys prepping process of the new machine that was self-serviced by a user, this guy creates a file on the Forefront TMG, on the firewall server, with it the IP that was assigned to this new server. And then, through some scripts that we built, and a program that we built with the ISA SDK, it gets published to the internet. So it's a full process. It's a full process where you just not only create self-service, and this is all with existing tools. Again, it's just an implementation. Nice thing is, you not only create a server, you add it to production, you give it all the respect the production server should have, but then it gets published to the internet. You guys want to see it? Or it's 5 minutes. One yes, one you can. Didn't get enough. What do I do? It's all good. Let me go into this part. So, again, I'm not trying to dash you with new products. I'm trying to dash you with what happens if you consume them all together. This is where it gets interesting. What would happen if instead of you talking to me about what are the best practices of the market, I would ask you, how many best practices are you generating per year, and how many are you consuming? Let me challenge you back. How many best practices are you recognizing? Recognizing, I mean, if you're the DBA, if you're the system administrator, you're saying, hey, this is a best practice. You recognize it, you document it. And you get compensated for finding and implementing these guys. And the rest of your team actually follows them. How many are you generating? Because you know what? What we found out is that when people not only treat servers generically and recognize workloads and then actually apply SLAs, they become more efficient. And by becoming more efficient, the cost of ownership goes down. This is a simple equation. You go to the gym, you lose weight, and you feel better. I just want to feel better. You didn't get it. You go to the gym, you lose weight, and you feel better. So if you want to become more efficient, you lose, you have lower TCO. It was a direct effect. It was people who also had lower TCO were more efficient. And it is always tied down to the amount of best practices. So what we did is we did a study of 100, I always get this wrong, it's either 152 or 164 companies that had their headquarters in the US, but they were all global companies. And this was a double-blind study. What's interesting about a double-blind is you don't know who's asking, and I don't know who's answering. I give a list of 5,000 companies to this third party. They go ask the question, and like I said, it was 100 and, I'll tell you in a second, 150-something companies answered, but I don't know who answered. So it's absolute honesty because they don't know that it's Microsoft asking either, right? And we asked this agnostically. We didn't ask this best practices in the sense of, how do you do it for Unix or for mainframe or for Windows? It was just agnostically. What was massively interesting is what we found is that for every single one, and I'm serious, every single one of these of the shops, 80% of the cost factor was labor. And if it wasn't 80, I'm saying, 69, 72. So the largest factor was labor. And it is because obviously it is the only biggest chunk of the recurring factors, right? Because hardware and all the other investment gets depreciated and in 3 years it's out. So every cost I'm going to tell you right now, every time I say a dollar figure, it is core server labor cost, okay? So with that said, we analyzed 6 workloads. And we didn't, like I said, this wasn't a Microsoft survey, right? So we didn't say exchange, we said collaboration, which meant intranet, internet, portals. Email is obviously clear. Identity and access was anything you need to have identity and access. So does this include firewalls? You betcha, okay? It doesn't include full security, but it does include full access. Data management was not the database, was everything you need below the database. Okay, so for any data server, because there's some people that run obviously full, relational databases, but there are people that still run other types of data management. So we just wanted to put what's the cost and what's the efficiency of everything for anything that's called data management. Then the next one was print, and the last one was connectivity. Connectivity is like dial tone services. So some people do have DHCP even today, some don't. So whatever you do, so that when I plug in a cord, I get to the intranet internet, okay? Whatever you do. So there you go. Those are the 6 workloads. Oh, there you go, 162 companies, okay? So we analyzed 162 companies, as you can see, in a ton of verticals, right? And what did we get out of this? Well, we asked them, and I'm not asking you to read this slide. We asked them, what are your best practices? And what was fantastic is after consolidating the semantics, the language that one used versus the other, we found out 51 best practices. Now, some of you could say, well, why not 62? I don't know. They answered 51 best practices, and that's what it boiled down to for data center, okay? So now we're going down to what the title of this session is. first thing is, a lot of people, including me, we said in our careers, everything has to have a benefit. If I don't see a TCO or a ROI, right, return on investment or a total cost of ownership analysis, if I don't see a positive return, then I'm not going to do it. And what we found out in this study was really eye-opening. It's not an investment versus benefit. It really isn't. What we found is the people who were more advanced, and you'll see it in a second, understood one simple thing. If you don't invest, there's no benefit. So there's some things that you got to do that have no return on investment. It's negative, okay? They cost money. That's it. But a lot of financial people get this. It's called cost of doing business. I'll give you an example. I'm a truck shipping company, okay? Purchasing gas will never be a positive return on investment, right? It's an expense. It's cost of doing business. If you don't purchase gas, your trucks don't run, and then you don't deliver, and you don't have a business. A lot of us can't go back to our management and say this, but you know what? You have to. Because until you don't say, look, man, there's some things I got to do, that there's going to be no ROI. If I don't do them, we don't have a working environment. See my point? This is basic as the oxygen that we breathe, right? No oxygen, no water, no food, no people. So, this is just a legal slide that says this is their numbers, not your numbers. So if you want your own numbers, you do your own. I'm just joking, okay? But you understand. I have to put this up. Sorry. We got 3 things out of this study. Let me just put all 3 up in the slide. And this is why it showed you that boring video, which I've already apologized for. Automation, $2,160 of benefit per server per year. That's not small money. Virtualization, $3,800. That's a big one too. The last one is the one why I have to put up the video. Integration. Because I want all of us to be exactly on the same page when I say that word. You see, the only way you get the 3 of them is if you also do this one. And integration means that you don't have, and here let me count them. You have a tool for backup, right? From one vendor. Then you have a tool for configuration management from another vendor, right? And you have another tool for monitoring or administrating, right? From another vendor. And then you have another tool for service management or ticketing, right? From another vendor. And then you have another tool for, service line automation from another vendor. How many skill sets do we need? How many skill sets do we need to manage this environment? 3. No, 5. So what happens if I integrate 2 of these? Well, you know what happens? Is I can start leveraging what I did on one side to the other. That's the magic of this stuff. And you got to be very humble. I don't know if you noticed, I didn't tell you integrate all 5. That's a lie. I don't know anybody who's achieved to integrate everything. But if you integrate 2, maybe 3, then you really get to leverage. And that's integration. So let's start with this. The devil is in the details. I love this one. I've been participating with this bank. It's a worldwide bank for 7 years now. And they're incredible. And they found out something that's amazing. 30% of the branch failures came from disparity on their server configuration. So let me say this in plain Spanish, okay? Because I'm from Mexico. Because their servers didn't have a basic image and were all configured the same way, they had 30% more errors in their environment. This is massive because it tells you something simple. If you don't have the tool set, don't think, oh yeah, but who wouldn't? Don't raise your hands. I'll catch at least half of you with this one. See, my point is, if you don't have the tool set that tells you that 30% of your servers are out of configuration, out of desired configuration, you'd never find out. That's the point. Because once these things go in the wild, guess what? They're out there in the wild. So, I'm just going to do 2 workloads because they're the most common and I don't have time to do more. So I'll do collaboration, I'll do email, because those are the most common that everybody has. And then what I'll do is I'll show you the benefits of the rest, okay? But I'll go into deep detail into this too. So let's start with collaboration. First thing, read this table with me. It's very simple. You can divide the cost by user, right? Or by server, whichever way you want it. It's the, 2 ways to slice the same bread. So the first one says, for people who are in basic, remember this is not Microsoft's opinion, this is not my opinion, this is 162 companies that answered. You know, there was a percentage of them that said we're in basic. Remember basic? This is unstructured, okay? That's why I showed you the model at the beginning. And standardized is just structured, and rationalized is pretty automated, you know, already pretty good, optimized. Okay, so people who are in basic, they go from $89 per user per year to $1. It's not bad. And if you look at the server cost, it is $23,000 per server to $1,000. Now again, we didn't make up these numbers. So what's really amazing is the last one, because this is total cost of ownership. But now, let's look at efficiency. Because you remember I told you you can't get one without the other? Let's look at efficiency. From 4.6 servers, so one IT resource, that's what that means, server IT full-time equivalent, right? From one person could manage in this environments 4.6 if they're in basic and 91.8 if they're in rationalized. That's massive. Do you agree with me? That's massive. So now the question beckons, how the hell do they do it, right? I guess that's why you guys are sitting here listening to a boring, ugly person like me. Well, let's divide this by stages. So people that were on the first stage, basic, they started doing two things. The first thing was, believe it or not, and I'm talking about portals, intranet, and internet servers, okay? So you could talk a lot about, this could be a lot like web servers, SharePoint servers, and whatever other matching brand you want. First thing was operating system maintenance. It could sound basic, but that's how they started, okay? I'm sorry. Didn't make this up. And the second one is thresholding and basic parameters. That's monitoring the whole workload. That's literally monitoring from the synthetic user accessing the website all the way down to the network, okay? So that's the two actions that they started with. Then, people who are basic and moved to standardized, what are the actions they took to get to rationalize? Well, clustering, patch management, automated deployment, thresholding, and performance parameters. This means now monitoring with performance parameters included and doing some of the reaction that I just showed you with the electricity. Okay? So example, if I get more than X amount of users on my intranet server B, I'm going to add more capacity automatically like this. Okay? And then they also did an automated deployment, which is what I just mentioned, and integrated intrusion detection. And the guys who were the most advanced, so the guys who were rationalized all the way to dynamic, which by the way, this was less than 1% of the population that we found out there, they did ability to deploy without downtime and automated provisioning. So if you tell me, what am I getting out of this talk, and excuse me for being this egocentric, it is, you don't do these things until you're at that stage. You see my point? Because many of us get excited, and I'm not being sarcastic, and say, I want the ability to deploy without downtime. Man, if you're not in step 3, don't do this. You see? Because you're not ready operationally. It's not a purchasing question. It's not how much you can buy. It is, are you there operationally? So you can actually consume the next level of processes. Because this is a progression. So, what was the percentage of people that actually consumed this? Well, I know if you get this, it says something very simple. Average 30% of people had these processes. I don't want to divide you guys. I don't want you to raise your hands, play poker with me. But my point is, measure yourself. Let's go deep into this one. If we're talking about people who are going from basic to, sorry, I'm pointing here, basic to standardized. So people who are still pretty basic on the processes and they're standardizing the processes, okay? What are the actions? Well, I don't know if you notice, I'm going to divide this very simply. There's some things that give you clear, large benefit, and that's what these bars are, right? The dark blue. And the light blue are, that just costs money. That's called negative TCO, right? It's just an investment, period. So the biggest chunk of this is configuration management. Did you notice that? In other words, for the workload of collaboration, right? The biggest factor that you should be looking at is configuration management. And if you want to divide into its components, it's right there. And some things just plainly cost money, okay? There's no way out of this. Some things are basic cost of doing business. And some things give you great benefit. This one here is a big debate. Creating the first server image, well, that just costs money. In the next stage, you start using that server image over and over and over, and that just gives you huge benefit. Okay, but you got to divide those two actions per se. Systems management plays a small piece, so monitoring, administration, maintenance, and processes a small piece, as well as storage. So the biggest one is configuration management. If I look at the next one, the next stage, is this stuff good? Is this? Thank you. This is a lot of work. I don't know if you notice. This is a lot of good work. So by you saying yes or no, it really shapes if we do, this type of studies or not. So I'm not just asking for goodness of me standing in front of you. This is a lot of money invested into these things. What about the next stage, standardized to rationalized? Well, let me break it up for you. Configuration management still plays a really big part, but now it plays a really big part into the biggest TCO benefits and the biggest TCO investments. You notice that? It is all the way up in the band and all the way down at the bottom. It is server clustering, patch management, automated deployment, and all the way down, load balancing, and automatic patch testing. So some things just cost money, okay? And integrated with systems management is a huge investment at the beginning, but it is also a huge benefit on the next stage. And then you have that this stage is mainly affected by systems management now. So while your first step, if you want to consolidate this, was configuration management, the next step is systems management and integration. And I hope I'm not being too generic. You're seeing the components there, if you want to break it down. And then the next one would be security management, storage, and virtualization. Okay, good stuff. If you want to go to the Star Wars world, this is the world where nobody exists, right? This is keynote demo type of environment where everything works. That was a bad joke, and you guys were supposed to at least giggle. I mean, what's wrong with this? It's either too early or I'm getting really bad with my jokes, man, and those two could be true. I know, a little of both. I'm telling you. Like, I know I'm sad, that's all good, man. My wife reminds me all the time. I don't need reinforcement on that one. But again, if you're going to rationalize the dynamic, there's huge benefits, but there's very few people that are here. Okay? And let me just show you one that kills me. You see the one at the bottom? That guy I call the unicorn, right? Single sign-on. That's a unicorn. I have not seen anybody that admits not having it, but nobody has seen it. If you tell them, well, do you have single sign-on for everything? They're like, well, not everything. You're like, then you have consolidated management or consolidated identity, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I have that. Okay, well, that's all you should aim for, because you know what? With all due respect, single sign-on every single slide that I'm going to show you is way at the end. So people achieve it way at the end, and those who actually achieve it, you ask them, was it worth the investment? And most of them say, don't ask me that. It took too long, too much money to get here, and I don't know if I got anything from having 5 passwords to 1 password. So 5 is good. 15, not so good. 50, no, man, you're in the wrong alley completely.
There are products that do it.
Yeah, it's a ton of investment, though. It's a ton of investment. Because a lot of people have, you see, the problem that you have here, no, but I'll tell you something. The problem that we have here is we've been simmering that pot of identities for 30 years, not throwing anything out. And then we want a magic wand, right, that puts all the spaghetti straight in 1 second. So it's a tough one. Let me go on. Anyways, you get this. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is a big one, okay? Why is it a big one? Because everybody has it, right? That's the only reason. Let's talk about what we found here. This gets interesting because this is a more humble one. It is 7.3 servers versus 17. So it's not, 5 gazillion servers more. But this is enough to make it from $15,000 to $6,000 a year per server, or in other words, from $36 per user or per inbox, however you slice it, to $9. Remember, this does not take into account the cloud, okay? There's no public cloud here. There's no Office 365. This is you running it, okay? 100%. This doesn't even take into consideration private cloud. This is you running it.
What's your definition of Dynamics? Is that as a service? Or
Yeah.
Dynamics?
Yeah.
That's why you're just staying in
Yeah. Well, the
Because
truth
if
is,
we have a data center, we're really, if we're decent, we're in the center category.
we didn't find almost anybody in dynamic. And in this study, nobody came out. People weren't rationalized with some dynamic capabilities. But we haven't found yet somebody that's fully dynamic is a little bit of a nifty stage because it's a stage where all the new stuff comes in, you know, all the crazy future stuff. But it's also the stage where staying there is like staying in a new house. In 3 months, you're not in a new house anymore. So it's super expensive. Therefore, most companies, even when they get to dynamic, you know, a couple of X time later, months, years, whatever, you shift down to rationalized. Okay? So let's look at the workload. Well, again, operating system maintenance was the first, but what gets interesting are the next ones. Look at this. The automated deployment process, trouble of handling, feedback and reporting, cloning, and imaging, as well as out-of-band management. And the biggest one is out-of-band management. Did you notice that? Because being email a critical business application, like many of you have already recognized, it becomes the biggest aspect here. And then you have the really hard ones, like, again, single sign-on, right? Because I'm not talking about single sign-on with your Windows environment and with something else. I'm talking about single sign-on as in single, okay? Again, 30-something. If I average all them out, I'm going to get 30-something, right? High 20-something% of the people that we inquired to told us that these are the processes that they consume. Let me go through the following 3 slides, and then we'll go into all the other workloads. Is this detail good? Is this amount of detail decent? Does this help you a little more? Well, everything here was almost an investment. So we found that people who were in basic moving to standardized, they had a tough, steep hill to climb because it's really complicated to justify why you want to do standardized move out and change and standardized hardware for exchange environments. Just to give you a very specific example, right? It's like, well, you don't. You need, you just buy a server and now our preferred vendor is not X anymore, it's Y. So why do you care about standardizing your hardware? Well, because it is a prerequisite for your next step. That's my point. It's not because we're just making this up. It's what we found is people who did step 1 were able to move to step 2, and so on and so forth. It is that reason. So here what we're saying is configuration management is again the biggest chunk on basic, then storage management, then systems management, and that's it. When we're talking about standardized to rationalized, we're talking about mostly systems management. And this is a big one. Look at the amount and sheer painting of blue on the screen. The amount of monitoring and administration and maintenance that you need to make this successful. If we talk about configuration management, it thins out as you go forward, as well as storage management. And as I move to the last one of these, it's interesting to see that from rationalized to dynamic, we do see some single sign-on here. We see configuration management coming back as an automated and out-of-band management. So if you want to get just the full upscale of this, it's out-of-band management what I'm talking about. Last but not least, let's do the other 3, but just in benefit. Now, I'm not joking about this. I'll give you my email at the end, and if you're interested in the full study, I'll give you the link to the full study. I have no problem with that. And if you want the full detail to all the other ones, this is just giving you the same. I'm going to give you at the end the consolidated view, and I'll be honest with you. If you just follow that guideline, the consolidated view for any workload, they were similar enough that it was enough. And I was just trying to prove that by showing you the detail of 2 of them, right? Almost everything, surprisingly enough, proved to be the same 4 steps or the same 7 steps. You'll see it in a second. So if we just look at data management, 35 servers to 96, so double, $3,000 to $1,000, so a third cheaper, so 63% cheaper if you do the division. In identity, it was interesting. It was 52 servers to 82 and $2,000 to $1,000, so half the cost. And if you look at connectivity, this one was massive, and I'll tell you why, okay? Because this one is surprising. Like, what? Are you serious? How do you get to those numbers? It was because nobody managed them. I'm not being sarcastic, okay? If I ask you, do you have good configuration management, out-of-band management, monitoring, configuration, backup, for your DNS, DHCP environment, most people didn't raise their hand, okay? It was really very few people who actually had this environment well taken care of. It's like a forgotten child, right? It's like long lost cousin. And you can see it here, 29 servers to 366. Because look, with all due respect, once you manage them and configure them, that's it. There's not much more you can do to these guys. And you can do it to a ton of them. So that's why the efficiency goes so way up. And the same thing for labor, right? Sorry, labor cost. So 3,000 per server, 3,700 to 3,301. For print, we found out something that was super sad. We found nobody rationalized. I'm not kidding you. We didn't find one single person who met all the criteria to being rationalized. In other words, it was the most left out, forgotten workload out of every single one. And what we found is that the efficiency factors were already huge just from basic to standardized. Look, double the amount of servers that you can manage and half the cost. So impressive enough. I hope you're getting good ideas. That's all that this session is about, okay? Don't get me wrong. I know I don't have a cool product to show you. This is just about giving you good ideas, humbling down with all due respect to you and saying, look, there are 17 things that you know you got to go do them. And if you get 7 reinforced ideas of what you thought you had to do, but you weren't sure, then you already got value out of this. And if there's 3 ideas that you had no idea you had to do, and you actually went out and did them, then I'm sorry. I know I'm not giving you a revolutionary talk, but I hope I'm giving you a really good evolutionary talk. And I'm giving you really good tips on what we saw that people are doing that really helps. Okay? And like I said, I know I'm not telling you something that you didn't know before. But the question is not whether you knew it, it's whether you're doing it. Okay? Be careful with that one. So what is the net of this? In other words, if I go back and I say, you know what, enough, man. You've driven me crazy. I've seen all your workloads. Fun. I want to know the 16 things I got to go do or whatever, right? To any workload to make it better. And this is what we found. So for standardized, we found use standard builds for your servers, for your applications. If you can use some cool technology like virtualization, application templating, imaging, cloning, whatever you want. Standard, okay? Standard in your language, not in mine. Number 2, imaging cloning. Number 3, regular maintenance on operating systems. And this is for all workloads. So again, I know some of you are going to say, duh, I do that. Do you do that to your DNS servers? Yeah, next. CC to all workloads. The next one is automated backup process. Build standard move out and change. Operate on management. And that means truly having integrated management tools that give you reds that are reds, greens that are greens, and keep the management tool clean as you can. And that is a lot of work, okay? I know that that is already a big effort. And that's a big investment that most people say, yeah, but what's my return on investment? There is no return on investment. When it breaks, you'll know about it, and that will be your return on investment, sadly as it is. Baselining of your performance. Here, let me explain this one. This one's super important. If you have no knowledge of when is the peak time for your, let me talk about an example. If I run an airline and I have a ticketing system, okay? When is the peak time in the year for your ticketing environment, then you will not be ready to automate it. You see my point? And I didn't go from A to B. I went from A to G, okay? If you don't understand the behavior of your environment, it'll be super hard to automate it correctly because you will automate it generically. And I'll say this once, I'll say this 1,000 times. None of you have generic environments. That does not exist. So, the last one is automated restore. And this one is super tough because most people have backups. Most people have backups that actually work, but not most people have automated restores or tested them. And I know that this has been the same old for every single talk you've heard in the last 20 years, but then why do we keep saying it, right? Why is it still on the list? And then the next one, if you're actually done all these, because I believe that most of you are going to say, check, 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 this one I'm missing, okay? But this is where it gets interesting. In rationalize, some people are going to say, no, man, virtualization should have been in the standardized one. I'm not going to fight you, okay? Some people say clean your closet and then move it wherever you want. Some people say move it wherever you want and then clean it. You choose, okay? We actually had a huge argument whether this was on the upper box or the below box. Again, you choose. Virtualization is a great tool, but it is not an ends to all means. You know, it is not, it won't save you. It's a different location. Let me explain to you something simple. Fat, ugly, bad speaker is in room 213, and if you move me to 210, it's the same speaker, okay? It's the same with your workloads. If it's a fantastic workload, it'll behave well here and there. If it is well managed, it's just well managed here and there, okay? So the location is not going to give you better best practices, right? And then, this is where it gets interesting. Automate your patch management process. What does that mean? Your patch testing, your patch deployment, your patch success rate, and your rollback strategy. So I'm not talking about one part of the process, I'm talking about the whole part, right? The whole thing. Then we're talking about deployment and rollback, which is just this is just a carryover, that mistake in my part. Implement server clustering and load balancing. When I say clustering, I don't mean just clustering, I mean high availability strategy, okay? This is a simple way of saying what we asked this 162 companies. Exactly. It is, what are you doing for your high availability? And some people said load balancing. Some people said something very interesting, mostly for web workloads. They said, we don't have clustering, we don't have load balancing per se. What we have is replacement. I said, what do you mean? Yeah, we have 7 servers, and when one breaks, we grab another one off the rack and pow. And do you fix the broken one? Yeah, later. Because what's really important is just, keep the service up. And I can do it with this workload, and it's cheaper than actually having, okay, fine, whatever works for you, as long as you have a strategy for availability. It's implemented, and guess what? It works. Automated system integration with system management tools. That's the stuff I showed you in the video, or I intended. And if I didn't, I apologize, okay? But I intended to show you what does not only monitoring, but automated recovery looks like and feels like, right? And then you have undertaking thresholding of system performance parameters. In other words, this is where you not only measure your performance, but you apply different behaviors based on your performance. So once my ticketing server goes to this level, or once this many users connect to my database, what the hell am I supposed to do? And if you don't automate that, then you're not at this stage. And we saw, I'll give you a simple example. There was a very interesting application, which was the expense report application in a company, okay? And when it came to the deadline of submitting expense reports every 3 months, because they had a deadline every 3 months, that if you didn't expense there, you'd lose your 3 months, right? You couldn't report later, your expenses. One day before, the website would always fall down. So what these guys did is they actually measured which offices the traffic was coming from, on which hours, and on which days, and they actually add capacity right before the peak now. And they take capacity away. They did some good investment in this. It costed money. So I'm trying to say, yeah, this costs money, right? But now the service is really flexible, and it doesn't have 17 servers just waiting for the slackers to go in and put their expense reports in, right? They have 2 servers most of the month, and then when they need it, they have another 15. So it's very interesting. But it's not on demand. It's because you understood your behavior. So some people could say, well, it would be more fun to have it on demand. Whatever works for you, that's what I'm trying to say. If preemptive understanding works, that's good. And if automated understanding works, that's good too. Integrated management tools with intrusion detection. This means the last step of this. It means identity, configuration, and monitoring integrated into one. So if I get an intrusion, if I get some security breach, what do? What does lockdown, feels and looks like? And last but not least, these are 2 brand new slides from a new study we're doing, which I will hopefully be honored to present with Brett here next year, because Brett didn't come down this time around. This is an incredible study. The next stage of the studies are the following. Is it better in the virtualized world? That's a fantastic question. I'm sorry to tell you. That's a fantastic question. Is it better in the virtualized world, right? Is it better under the sea, right? Is it better on the virtualized world than on the physical world? And what we found out is that if you look at every single workload, collaboration, data, email, identity, connectivity, and print, obviously as you move forward, so as people consume more best practices out of this 51 best practices. The labor per server per year went way down. You can see that. But this is where it gets interesting. A lot of people say when you virtualize, it's easier to do A, B, or C. And what we found is, I'm sorry to tell you, no, sorry, you're completely wrong. When you're virtualized, you're exactly on the same thing, just different location. In other words, this is all virtualized. So everything, from basic to rationalized, everything that you're going to see here is virtualized environments. And what we found out is if you consolidate, if you average out all the benefits from all the different workloads, look at this. If you look at the top chart, by doing all this, right, any workload that was, so averaged, all workloads that were on basic, $28,000 per server per year. But if you had good practices, so this is already with virtualization. But if you had good practices, $794. It is a massive change. You saw that? So in other words, yes, virtualization is already a great benefit, but by far, it's not the only one. And it's just one out of, like you saw, 16. Okay? So you can do a lot with your left hand, you can do a lot with your right hand, but it is the combination of both hands that really get you there. And the other one is if you want to see efficiency. So again, server managed by full-time equivalent of IT. And why do we call them FTEs? Because you can have 3.5 of you assigned to A and then 5.2 to B, whatever it is, right? Because we all have, 300% of our time nowadays now. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is 4.1 servers per person to 145. And it was not based on virtualization by itself. So no, the virtualized world gives you a benefit, but it is a location change. Excuse my Spanish, okay? It is nothing else. It is not an end to all means. It is truly the cohesiveness of all these processes that I've been trying to present. You know what I love about this is that it truly came from all these great companies that were kind enough to participate with us in this inquiry. So it is not an opinion. You know what I'm saying? It is not we analyzed A plus B. It's just plain numbers that speak for themselves. And again, maybe it doesn't give you too much surprise, but if it gives you validation, then I'm happy. And I may be too humble, but I'm happy that it just gives you validation. Again, if you already knew all this, then now you know that that's the right path and go implement it. That's my point. Because you're getting new features on the product every single time, right? Every iteration we do, you're getting a ton of new features. And I always say the same thing. It's not a question of how many new features you get in. It's how many features you consume and how many you integrate that actually make a difference in your environment. So, that's what this is saying. If you want to increase your agility, control your costs, you really have to progress on how many best practices you consume. How much time do we have more? What is this? Still green. I keep looking at that little light because when it turns red, there you go, I'm supposed to shut up. It's yellow. So I guess we take some good questions. That's the architectural track. You can win whatever good stuff, and there you go. That's the slide I love. Don't leave. Do me a favor. I think we still have a couple minutes. Give me 2 minutes of your time, okay? If after 2 minutes you just want to stand up and leave, go ahead. Do me a favor. Give me some feedback. Tell me what you guys think. Let's open up a dialogue for at least 1 minute, okay? Is this, question number one, is this useful and how? I'm not looking for validation. I'm looking for feedback. Yes, sir.
I personally use it. I would like to do that study on my own infrastructure, and because my CIO is all about charts and graphs and numbers. This would be a good study just to do by myself and present. That's how that's why I'm going to ask you for the email after.
Eduardo is just like Edward, but with a U. Okay. Eduardo K at Microsoft.com. My pleasure. So, forget this, is this useful? How can you apply stuff like this, or is this stuff that you're being asked to apply? I don't know. Start a talk. Anybody?
I think it's a more practical approach to building a roadmap.
Okay.
As opposed to something more architectural, if you would. It gives you a more implementable roadmap approach, I think.
The problem I have with our optimization model, and I've been working on the optimization model since it was created, honorably, is that many people said, yes, but so what, right? Yes, so what? I mean, I see the roadmap, I see what I can do with it, but now what's my step? And what I really like about this really brings it down. It brings it down to, you want to save money, you do A, B, C, and D, you save this much, right? And yes, what you said is absolutely right. These are just their costs. You got to get your own. I usually, what I usually do when I'm talking to CIOs, and I end up doing that most of my time, is I show them a little bit of this, and then I say, how much you're going to invest? And forget about software. You already bought most of the software you need by the fact, It's not a software. It's how much you're going to invest in your people. Because I don't know if you noticed this, but what this is great about, sorry, I'll get back to you in a second. What this is great about is, do you have the right amount of people? Because after all the laybacks and layoffs and comebacks and outsourcing and insourcings, and now we're not going to go back and we're going to come back and whatever, nobody has done in a long time, well, I say nobody, I apologize. Very few people I found out that have done how many people do I actually need to run all these workloads and all these functions, and do I have the right amount of hands? And I'll give you a great example. There's this partner in Europe that surprised the hell out of me. I said this in a session yesterday. This guy came back to me and he says, I sell pool services. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. Pool, like where you swim? I'm like, yeah. Like, yeah, the company owns the tools, the environment. I tell them what's the minimum specification. So, you need this much chlorine, you need this brush, I don't know, you need config manager, version whatever, you need this many servers, you need your infrastructure to be this much. And then this guy brings in 3 mega certified geniuses that do the inventory for that company, right? With the tool, and then they get X amount of fidelity. In other words, they get what? 80%, 90%, 70% fidelity, that inventory is good. But you always get a part that you actually need feet, right? To go and look at the machine and say, no, this is wrong. So they also bring another 15 cousins. I always use that term, right? And the 15 cousins are to go do the... And what I love about this is they charge you for inventory services a year, right? They don't charge you for 17 or 2, so you don't care about the headcount. And the guy who used to run inventory management in that company never went away, so he never got fired. He's now the administrator of the service. He still gets it, he still runs config manager, he still does all his processes, but day comes that they need to run the inventory, he's not enough. So what they recognize is, in this case, right, for this process, it's not a tools question and it's not a process question, it's a hands question. So I'm going to get a service to do another great example. I know companies that go and sell you the autoloader, the tapes, the software to do the backup, but then they go and configure your policies, and they come back every 6 months and run policies with you and adequate the policies. Because they recognize that the policies should be changed over time, right? Because you will change, and therefore your backup may not be recoverable after a configuration change you did. So they come back every 6 months and they tailor it a little bit. So things like that are incredible ways to justify that, no, we don't need another 3,000 headcount, right? But we need another, I don't know, X amount of dollars in budget to buy this as a service. And nobody loses their job. It is about doing it right. I get excited with this stuff. I'm sorry. Yes?
I look at your categories, comparing it to my customers, and basic is where they are now. And then the next step would be virtualization locally because they aren't comfortable with not having it off-site. And then the next step is a local data center that they can actually touch and go to and they have control of. And then the final step is a remote data center where you get everything. And you have to show them and justify the cost.
Be very careful. You can run it locally, remotely, and whatever and do it wrong, and you can run it locally, remotely, and do it right. I agree with what you said, as long as you add the right and wrongness to it. Yes, I'm good with that. Yes, yes. Go ahead, sir.
I'll add a couple.
Oh, please, go ahead.
So it was a little heavy on numbers. The presentation, PowerPoint, we get a little PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Numbers.
I've been blamed for that.
The helpful part is going to be helping me prioritize what I can see the most bang for the buck. The other thing that just giving you all the thoughts that are running in my head, I'm a little cynical of the numbers. And the reason I'm cynical is I've seen the Microsoft calculators say, well, if you're going to save this much money, you go to the next year, all this 2007. And, those numbers look awesome on my resume saying I saved $250,000, but the reality is we don't. So I'm slightly cynical.
I'm good with that.
But, I'm gonna get forward. Taking some of the detail out of it does help you identify maybe the top 10 things that you can do to see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, exactly. Because you know what? There's three things in my mind as I build this. I see also the numbers, and I'm also as cynical as anybody. So I see them, and I'm like, fine. Thank God this weren't a calculation. This was something somebody reported.
Right.
But I'll tell you something. I don't mind. It's not an I don't care. It's I don't mind if you say I agree with them 100%. As long as you get 5 things you got to go out and do. So that I think that's the net. Because again, when I talk to CIOs, I'm like, look, you can hang up with the whole thing, right, and spend 10 hours there. You're going to end up with 10 things you got to go do anyways. So start that way, end that way. That's fine.
Yeah. It's also depend on the size of the organization. Not everything will be applied.
Oh,
I mean, if I have-
absolutely, man.
if I have
Thank you.
200 servers, I mean, I don't want to automate the build of it, but I want to automate the management.
Even better than that, this has no relevance in companies that have less than 300 PCs. So less than 300 PCs, I wouldn't listen to any of this. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just trying to tell you, if you don't have an infrastructure to manage, right, if you have 10 servers, then it's a dramatically different conversation. Exactly. Well, yeah, there's 10 ways to skin that cat. Thank you dearly. I'll be here a couple more minutes. And please, if this is good, then on the comments. Yeah, Eduardo, okay. And please, if you want more of these and you want us to invest in more of these studies, put it in your comments. Okay? More than anything. Exactly. Exactly.
A working result of the study with email costs versus me costs.
Yeah, we haven't done that study. This study stays on location. No, EDU, EDU, AR, D, O, K. That's it. That's all good, man. My pleasure. Yes, sir.
I don't need to see CFO needs to see something.
That's the point. Look, man, I love one thing. You know, a lot of technical people say, what do you need that stuff for? Well, if you don't justify it, you ain't got it. So you choose. Exactly. Exactly. Yes, sir.
I'm like from a large organization, with 7 to 10,000, so like trying to find tools that people are willing to utilize for deployment and configuration and monitoring that actually use the tool.
When you have that size, you end up using a lot of tools. And the biggest problem is not using a lot of tools, is that different areas use different conflicting tools to do the same function. The biggest problem in very large organizations, which I commonly work with, is that left hand doesn't talk to right hand. So if you can actually get, so there's an equation that I've used all my career, which is, I'm truly saying magical, man. Oh, sorry, sir. Okay, thank you, sir. So the point is this: buy-in times quality of plan equals results. In other words, you can have a plan that's magnificent, nobody buys into it, your result is. And you have a dirty plan that everybody buys into it, your result is shit. So you gotta have those two. And my point is, more than the technology, I'm trying to tell you, it's not about the tool or the quantity of tools or whose tool. It is as long as you have buy-in and the left hand and the right hand in organizations that have that amount of size. So 7,000 servers could be above 100,000 pieces. So my point is, when I say above, it could be 200 too, but whatever. When you leverage that, you have so many conflicting teams doing the same feature function in so many different ways. And the branches being managed one way, and the corporate environment another one, and the public environment, so public customer-facing environment another way. And then eventually, you can't even do this right. And there's not even a way to study it. So my point to you would be first cohesiveness, and then this. Because if not, there's no way to be successful.
I think that's where we have separate teams that are in charge of it. We have an automation team in charge of